Welcome to Marking the End Times. I'm Mark Hitchcock, and as always, it's so great to have you with us. And just wanted to give you a heads up about what we're going to be doing here these next few weeks. What we're going to be doing is going back and replaying a few of the programs from this year that were very helpful to many of you to kind of recap this past year, but also to kind of prepare us and kind of help launch us into 2026. And so we thank you so much for being a part of endtimes.com and just your generosity, your kindness, and encouragement to us. We pray that you and your families will have a great holiday, a wonderful Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year. We'll look forward to seeing you at the beginning of next year. We'll pick back up again and begin to highlight many of the things that are happening in our world that are going to be so significant for 2026. God bless you, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. Well, welcome to Marking the End Times. I'm Mark Hitchcock, and on this week's program, I want to begin a very special, very important two-part series that I want to title, Why I'm a Premillennialist and Why You Should Be One Too. What I want to do is briefly present the three main views of the millennium. The millennium is the 1,000-year reign of Jesus. And then I want to give, over these next 2 weeks, 6 key reasons why I believe the premillennial view is the view that most faithfully represents the teaching of the scriptures. Now, let me just kind of give some background here on today's program. And for some of you, this may be a review, and some of you, this may be new stuff. There's 3 main views on the timing and the nature of the millennium, the 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ. There's a view that's amillennial, there's the postmillennial view, and there's the premillennial view. You can see they all have a different prefix, post, and pre. Now, there's a view out there some hold that they'll claim that they're panmillennial. They say they're just going to believe it's all going to pan out in the end. And I always like to say that I'm pro-millennial. I'm for the millennium anytime. But as you can see in each of these words, there's a main term there, the word millennium or a millennial, which means 1,000 years. It comes from the Latin. The Latin mille is 1,000 and annus is years. So 1,000 years is the millennium. So in the Bible, the millennial kingdom is that phase of God's kingdom when Jesus Christ rules and reigns. And although the word millennium never appears in the Bible, the duration of this kingdom of Jesus Christ is stated 6 times in Revelation chapter 20, verses 1-7, and it's said to be a period of 1,000 years. Now, let me just mention up front that the things that all these views agree on. I think it's always good to talk about what we agree on before we talk about what we disagree about. All these views, amillennial, postmillennial, premillennial, we all believe that Jesus is the king. That Jesus is the king, that he's Lord of Lords, and we all believe that Jesus will one day return to this earth, literally, physically, and visibly, to judge the earth. So those that hold these views, we all believe Jesus is the king, and we all believe he's coming back someday. And those 2 points of agreement are part of kind of the essential, the eschatological essentials or eschatological non-negotiables, if you will, that bind us together as believers. Now, we have to recognize, though, there are some significant differences between these different views and how we understand the events of the end times. And this is not just a study in some kind of irrelevant theory, because whichever one of these views you hold will determine how you understand the characters and the chronology and the consummation of the end times. So let me mention now the 2 main points of disagreement. Well, where there are a lot of differences between these 3 views, there's 2 main points of disagreement. The first is, when will Jesus reign? The timing of his reign. Amillennialists and postmillennialists believe that the kingdom is now, that Jesus' kingdom is right now, that he's ruling now, that his kingdom is between his first and second comings. So it's a present kingdom that's now. Whereas premillennialists believe that it's going to be in the future. Now, the second question is, how will Jesus reign? The nature of his reign. Again, amillennialists and postmillennialists, they believe that it's a spiritual heavenly reign, whereas premillennialists believe it's going to be an earthly, literal reign, a reign on the earth. That's how he's going to reign. It's not just a spiritual reign, it's a literal earthly reign. Now, with that in mind, let's just look at each of these views real quickly and how they look at these 2 different points. And then I want to get into the reasons why I'm a premillennialist. But I want to lay this foundation first. The amillennial view, it has the letter A in front of it, obviously, before the word millennium, which has the idea of no millennium. It negates the word. And when you put the letter A in front of a word, it negates the meaning. That's not really true, though. They do believe in a millennium. They just don't believe in a future earthly literal 1,000-year reign of Christ. And so amillennialists believe that the kingdom of Christ is right now between the first and second comings of Jesus. They believe it's not a literal period of 1,000 years, but a symbolic long period of time. And they believe that Satan is bound today as a result of Christ's death and resurrection, according to Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 to 3. And they believe that Jesus now, his kingdom's not going to be a literal future physical kingdom, but they believe it's a present spiritual kingdom, with Christ reigning in the church, in the hearts of believers, and in heaven over the souls of the redeemed. Now you say, well, what about postmillennialists? Well, it's very similar. They also believe that Christ is reigning now. It's symbolic. It's not a literal 1,000 years. He's reigning right now in a spiritual kingdom between his first and second coming. But the difference is postmillennialists believe Jesus will come back post or the end of the millennium after a golden age has been ushered in on this earth by the preaching of the gospel. They think this golden age is going to come by degrees as the whole world is eventually Christianized. And when that happens, Jesus will come back post or the end of the millennium after it's already been established here on the earth. Now, the premillennial view, the view that I'm going to argue for, is that the second advent of Jesus Christ will precede the millennial reign. He's going to come back to this earth visibly and physically and literally and gloriously, and he's going to set up that 1,000-year reign on the earth, and it's going to happen after that 7-year time of tribulation is poured out on the earth. And premillennialists believe that the millennial kingdom will be a literal, physical, earthly kingdom of 1,000 years where Jesus is going to rule and reign on this earth from his earthly throne in Jerusalem. So that's the premillennial view. Now, you say, well, which one of these views is right? Well, that's the big question. And what I've got 6 points, and they spell out an acronym. The acronym is PREMIL, PREMIL. So each one of these starts with one of those letters. It helps me remember them better that way. So I believe this view is far superior to these other views. And I'm going to give you these reasons why I think it's better. The P is promises of God. The R is retribution against the false Trinity. The E is it's the earliest view in church history. The M is it's the most natural reading of Revelation 20, verses 1 to 6. The I is the incarceration of Satan. And the L is the literal 1,000 years in Revelation 20. So I want to look at these. We're just going to look at the first few of these, and we'll pick up next time and give these other arguments. But here's the first point, the P, the promises of God. Premillennialism is the only one of these systems that allows for a literal fulfillment of God's promises or covenants with David and Abraham. God unconditionally, unilaterally promised Abraham that he would give him descendants, the whole world would be blessed through him, and that he would give him the land that he promised, and he would give it to his descendants forever. Now, the first 2 prongs of those promises from God have been literally fulfilled. But the part that hasn't been literally fulfilled is God has not given the Jewish people that land that he promised to them. And so if God's going to be true to his promise, the time period that best fits the fulfillment of that is a millennial reign when Jesus is on the earth, and that land will be given to the Jewish people in fulfillment of that covenant. And God promised King David in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 12 to 16, that one of his descendants would sit on his throne. David's throne was an earthly throne. He would sit on that throne and he would rule over his kingdom forever. Now again, amillennialists and postmillennialists, they believe that Jesus is that king, but they believe that kingdom is now and that Jesus is ruling and reigning in heaven over that kingdom. But God promised David that one of his descendants would sit on his throne. David's throne was an earthly throne and would rule over that kingdom, the kingdom of Israel, forever. That's never been fulfilled. Jesus has never ruled on an earthly throne and ruled over David's kingdom. So I believe because of that those covenants can only be fulfilled in that future period of time. They have to be fulfilled literally for God's promises to come true. So the future millennial kingdom of Christ is the only time when the Davidic covenant and the Abrahamic covenant can be literally completely fulfilled. Now, there's a lot more we could say about that, but that point right there, I think, is very important. It's the promises of God. There has to be a millennium for God's promises to be fulfilled. Let me just cover one more of these points of our acronym here, and that is the R. And that's the retribution against the false Trinity. The retribution against the false Trinity. So what do you mean by that? Well, if you go back up into chapter 19 of Revelation, the last few verses there is the Battle of Armageddon. At the Battle of Armageddon, it says that Christ is going to come back. He's going to seize the Antichrist, who's called the Beast. He's going to grab his cohort, the false prophet, and cast them into the lake of fire. And then the very next verse says, in chapter 20, verse 1, I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key of the abyss and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold of the dragon, the serpent of old, who's the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And we're going to talk more about that next week, about this binding of Satan. But you'll notice here that Christ, at the end of chapter 19, judges the beast, or the Antichrist, and the false prophet. And then here in the very next verse, there's a judgment on Satan. He's thrown in the abyss. Now, here's what amillennialists and postmillennialists would say. They'll say, well, this is Armageddon up here, and the beast and the false prophet are going to be thrown in the lake of fire. But now in chapter 20, we're going all the way back to the first coming of Jesus, when Satan now is going to be bound. Now, it seems better to me that all three of them are being dealt with at the same time. This is the false Trinity, this counterfeit, unholy Trinity. And it makes sense to me that God's dealing with all three of them at the same time. He deals with the Antichrist, the false prophet, and then right in sequence here, he deals with Satan. And that supports the idea of this premillennial view that Christ is coming back to set up his kingdom on the earth.